It feels like most of the time the world just demands that you operate on this constant low-level frequency of panic.
Oh, absolutely. It's like an ambient anxiety.
Right. Like, think about your morning routine today. You probably woke up, reached for your phone before your eyes were even fully adjusted to the light, and just absorbed a dozen different global crises.
And probably 3 urgent work emails, too.
Exactly. Plus a handful of social media updates all before you've even had a sip of coffee. You
Yeah.
hit the ground running, but it's more like you hit the ground sprinting on a treadmill that someone else controls.
It really is the absolute default state of modern existence. I mean, we treat information, progress, and even our personal lives like a race we are perpetually losing.
Yeah.
Our nervous systems are just flooded. We are constantly absorbing, constantly chasing, and structurally, we leave zero empty space in our days to simply process what we are doing.
And because you, our listener, are someone who is deeply curious, someone always chasing knowledge, always looking for that next mental upgrade, we thought today would be the perfect time for an intentional, energetic reset.
A much needed one, I'd say.
For sure. Today's deep dive is entirely about what happens when we deliberately take our foot off the gas. We are going to explore what it actually means to stop the frantic intake, slow down, and focus on the tactile, physical world right in front of us.
Which is surprisingly a radical concept.
Yeah.
To stop moving and just exist in your physical body without trying to optimize the moment.
It really is. And our guide for this reset comes from a fantastic set of sources today. We are looking at material from Tarot by Heisey, specifically from their website, tarotbyhike.net.
Mhm.
We have an astrological forecast for tomorrow, March 31st, 2026. What makes this source so compelling is that the forecast is paired with this really evocative piece of short fiction. It's a StoryScope titled The Weight of Roses.
The pairing of a direct forecast with a narrative piece is just a brilliant pedagogical choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives us the theoretical mechanics of the astrology, and then it immediately grounds those concepts by showing us their practical human application.
So our mission today is to explore this specific astrological shift mentioned in the text, which is Venus moving into Taurus. Now, this is a transit that began today, March 30, and runs through April 24th.
Right.
But even if you aren't someone who normally follows astrology, the profound practical lessons this text extracts from this event are universal. We are going to dig into the mechanics of patience, the real-world definition of tangible value, and how to make that massive psychological pivot from a mindset of sheer urgency to one of grounded steadiness.
To really understand how this works, we need to look at the underlying mechanics the author is referencing. The text states that Venus in Taurus, quote, stabilizes the field and brings everything back into the body.
Brings everything back into the body. That's a great phrase.
It really is. And why does that happen? Well, in astrological terms, Venus is the planet that represents what we value, our aesthetics, our pleasures, and how we attract things to ourselves.
Okay.
Taurus, on the other hand, is a fixed earth sign. It is deeply rooted in physical sensation, patience, and material reality.
So when you combine the planet of attraction with the sign of slow, deliberate Earth, you get a cosmic anchor. You're shifting out of this erratic, fiery, or airy energy and dropping into something dense and rich.
Precisely. The mechanism of this transit is deceleration. For the next 3.5 weeks, the instruction is to indulge the senses. The forecast says our financial instincts become sharper, our creative energies become grounded, and we are drawn to life's tangible pleasures.
Yeah, and the core thesis the author presents here is incredibly striking. They write, abundance isn't manifest through urgency. It's cultivated through steadiness.
That is the whole crux of it right there.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that line alone completely flips the script on how we are taught to operate. Society has conditioned us to run on this frantic, double-shot espresso mindset.
Totally.
The unspoken rule is that if you want more money, more success, better relationships, you have to move faster, push harder, and hustle constantly. But this text is telling us to shift to a slow, steeped cup of tea. It's arguing for less reaching and more receiving.
More receiving, yeah.
And that's not just a mental shift, That is a completely different physical posture.
What's fascinating here is the inherent contradiction to our modern hustle culture. We are universally conditioned to equate speed with importance. And if you reply to a Slack message in 30 seconds, you are deemed a dedicated worker.
Right, you're a team player.
Exactly. If you hit certain life milestones by an arbitrarily young age, you are successful. But this source instructs us to dismantle that equation. It tells us to prioritize true values in daily life. It places a far heavier weight on comfort, beauty, and simplicity than on sheer output.
But dropping that hustle has to be terrifying for a lot of people. Because urgency is almost like a numbing agent, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely it is.
If you are always moving, always distracted, you don't have to feel the discomfort of your actual reality.
That is the psychological weight of the instruction to literally stop and smell the roses. When you decouple the concept of abundance from speed, you are challenging a deeply ingrained defense mechanism.
Yeah, because for many people, rushing feels safe.
It does. It gives the illusion of control. Slowing down feels incredibly vulnerable because it forces you to look at your surroundings and ask yourself, do I actually like what I am doing? Cultivating steadiness requires a level of profound self-trust that urgency usually masks.
I love how you phrase that, the illusion of control. So theoretically, the astrology makes total sense. But what does stabilizing the field actually look like on a random Tuesday when you're late for work and your inbox is overflowing?
Right when reality hits.
Exactly, and that is exactly where this companion piece of fiction, The Weight of Roses, steps in to give us a practical blueprint. It shows us what this energetic shift feels like in the real world.
The story of Mara. It does a phenomenal job translating planetary movements into human behavior.
Let's set the scene for the listener. The story opens by describing a city that feels thin and hurried. The author writes that people are walking a half step ahead of their own lives.
A half step ahead, such a vivid image.
It really is. They're buying things they barely touch and making promises that just dissolve into midnight messages. It paints this visceral picture of a society where everything is slightly out of reach, where everyone is constantly leaning into the future.
It is a textbook description of a collectively dysregulated nervous system. The entire city is operating in fight or flight mode. There is no presence, only anticipation.
But then the shift happens. Venus moves into Taurus, and it doesn't arrive like a dramatic thunderstorm. The text says it arrives like a body remembering itself. And we follow this character, Mara. She works in a small restoration studio, repairing old frames and sculptures. Normally, she is just like everyone else in the city, rushing through her day, chasing invoices, treating money like a door that might slam shut at any second.
The quintessential mindset of scarcity.
Yeah.
The belief that there is never enough time, never enough resources, so you have to grab whatever you can as quickly as you can.
But on this particular morning, she finds herself sanding a wooden frame incredibly carefully. She isn't rushing to finish it. She is just following the grain of the wood. It isn't exciting, it isn't urgent, but the text says it feels good in a steady way.
A steady way.
Yeah, and I want to pause here and pull this back to you, the listener. Think about your own job right now. What is the equivalent of sanding the wood for you? Is it writing an email with actual deliberate intention instead of just relying on autocorrect and corporate templates?
Or actually listening to a colleague on a Zoom call instead of multitasking on another screen.
Yes, exactly.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, because the story shows that this deliberate intention is contagious. Mara's boss catches this new energy too. He comes into the studio and announces a massive shift in their business model.
Oh, this part is so good.
He says they're going to take on fewer commissions moving forward, but they're going to spend significantly more time on each individual piece. He admits they've been patching things up too quickly, and if they're going to repair things, they need to do it with proper integrity.
Which is such a wild thing to say out loud. In a scarcity mindset, telling your employees you are going to intentionally take on less work sounds like terrible business advice. It sounds like financial sabotage.
It does.
Yeah.
But that is the genius of the narrative. It completely challenges our assumptions about efficiency.
Right, and it pushes it even further when Mara goes on a walk during her break. She physically stops beside a garden to smell a rose. And while she's standing there, she meets this man, Tomas, who is just sitting on a stone wall sketching people in the park. He's drawing non-posed, ordinary moments.
He is observing reality as it actually is, not as people are performing it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Mara asks Thomas if he always sits there in the garden, and his response is so telling. He says, "Only when it feels worth the time."
Wow. Only when it feels worth the time.
Now wait, let's pause on Thomas for a second. I hear that, and I have to be honest. Sitting in a park sketching only when it feels worth the time sounds incredibly romantic. But for you listening right now, dealing with a mortgage, coordinating childcare, managing a mountain of emails, that sounds like a fast track to getting fired or going broke.
Sure, it sounds like a luxury.
Exactly. So how is this worth the time filter actually feasible in the real world? Or is this just a nice fantasy for a short story?
That is the essential friction of this entire deep dive. Is this actually practical? The author anticipates that exact skepticism and addresses it by scaling Mara's individual feeling out to the wider community.
Okay, so it ripples out.
Yes. The story doesn't just leave it at one guy sketching in a park. It shows a systemic, practical shift. Musicians in the city start playing slower pieces that make people actually want to pause and listen. Bakeries fill up with wandering, genuine conversations instead of rushed transactions. Neighbors start bringing each other fresh bread.
So it's not just a personal vibe shift. It is a structural change in how the community allocates its time.
Exactly. What the author is highlighting is a profound behavioral shift from grasping to noticing. When we look back at your question, is this feasible for someone with a mortgage? The story argues that doing things properly is actually the most sensible, economically sound approach.
How so?
Well, Mara's boss taking fewer commissions to do the work right isn't foolish. It's a long-term strategy for quality and reputation. The text notes that as people start choosing fewer things, they choose them more deliberately. This isn't just romantic fluff. It is a highly efficient way to allocate your energy and resources. You stop wasting time on the superficial and invest deeply in the substantial.
I see what you mean. The text even explicitly states that money started moving more sensibly. Mara starts choosing projects that pay fairly instead of scrambling for a dozen little projects that barely pay at all.
Right, quality over quantity.
Because she's not rushing, her work dramatically improves. Her clients notice the quality, and that creates real security.
She realizes that abundance has nothing to do with velocity. By bringing her full attention to the present moment, by standing the wood carefully, by doing one thing well, she creates higher quality work, which in turn creates true stability. She stops living a half step ahead.
So we've seen this really idyllic, positive side of the shift. The fresh bread, the slow music, the careful restoration, the financial sensibility.
It sounds wonderful.
But the source material doesn't just paint a utopian picture. It also issues some pretty stark warnings. Because to achieve this steady abundance, we have to actively prune away the things that are no longer working.
Deceleration forces confrontation. When you stop sprinting, the momentum that was blinding you dissipates. You suddenly realize how heavy the baggage you've been carrying actually is.
The forecast warns us to watch out for a few very specific traps during this Venus in Taurus transit. We have to be careful not to focus too much on outward appearances. We can't become overly attached to material objects just for the sake of having them. And we need to watch out for possessiveness in our relationships. But the most striking warning, and the one that I think will resonate with almost everyone listening, is about noticing where we've been tolerating mediocrity purely out of habit.
Oh, the trap of comfortable dysfunction.
Yes. The text gives these highly relatable examples. Think about the subscription you keep forgetting to cancel. Maybe it's a gym membership you haven't used in 8 months, but you keep paying for it, so it functions as this $40 a month guilt tax that just drains your energy every time you see the bank statement.
Or the situationship with someone who only texts you when it's perfectly convenient for them.
Yeah. Ugh, yes. And there's this incredible quiet moment in the story where Mara is at a restaurant and her friend confesses that she's been describing her relationship as fine for 2 years. And the friend suddenly realizes she doesn't even know what the word fine means anymore.
We really need to dwell on that because it is a devastatingly common realization. We use words like fine as a shield. We use them to avoid looking too closely at a void in our lives.
Wow, yeah.
A relationship that is fine is often one that is devoid of actual passion or growth. But it isn't quite bad enough to justify the immense, terrifying effort of dismantling a shared life. We tolerate it because the familiar mediocrity feels safer than the unknown.
So what does this all mean? For you, the listener, tuning into this deep dive, it means it's time to brutally examine the fabric of your own daily life. The author uses this incredibly vivid imagery in the story, describing these old, tolerated habits slipping away like coats that no longer fit.
I love that metaphor.
Me too. And I want to push that metaphor a bit deeper. If you've ever tried to wear a jacket you've physically outgrown, just because it used to be your favorite, you know how restrictive it is. You can't lift your arms, your posture rounds forward, you literally can't breathe as deeply.
And when you finally take that tight coat off, your physical posture changes immediately. You roll your shoulders back, you take a full breath, you take up your actual true space in the world.
Exactly. And astrologically speaking, taking up your true space is the whole point.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source is offering us a definitive rule for this transit.
Yep.
What is aligned stays, what is forced falls away.
What is force falls away.
That is the core mechanism of Venus and Taurus, according to the text. It demands structural authenticity. When you stop sprinting, the artificial momentum that was propping up those fine relationships, those convenient situationships, or those unfulfilling jobs simply vanishes. Without your frantic energy to sustain them, they collapse under their own weight.
Because they didn't have any structural integrity to begin with. You were just holding them together with sheer speed and panic.
Precisely. And the forecast breaks down the resulting mechanism beautifully. It tells us that we shouldn't chase. Instead, we attract by resonance.
Attract by resonance.
Yes. This is a fundamental causal shift in how we approach our desires. Whether it is a promotion, a friendship, or romantic love, the text argues that these things do not sustainably improve through sheer effort or anxiety. They improve through honest, deliberate choices. When you figure out what you truly value and you embody that steadily, when you stand up straight without that tight coat, you naturally attract circumstances and people that vibrate at that same frequency.
We don't chase, we attract by resonance. That is such a powerful takeaway. It takes all the pressure off. You don't have to hunt down your goals like prey. You just have to stand firmly in your own values, do the work properly, and let the right things come to you. In the story, when Mara and Thomas are sitting in the garden at the end, Mara says, "Things that fit seem to stay." And when Thomas asks her about all the rest of the things in life, she simply says, "The rest stops trying so hard to pretend."
It is the ultimate relief. The exhaustion we feel at the end of the week isn't always from the actual labor we do.
Yeah.
Often, it is the energy expended trying to make something work that hasn't been working for years.
Yeah.
It is the exhaustion of pretending.
That is so true.
The source is explicitly telling us, stop trying to force the puzzle pieces together. Let the coat that no longer fits slip off your shoulders.
So let's bring all of this together and distill the insights from today's sources. Based on the astrology and the story from Tarot by Heitzi, the next 3.5 weeks, this window of Venus and Taurus, is a cosmic invitation to drop the urgency. It is an invitation to stop patching things up quickly, just to keep moving, and instead to focus your energy on comfort, on tangible beauty, and on simplicity. The core lesson here is that true abundance is found in staying, not in sprinting.
It is about reclaiming your attention and your physical presence in the world. It is recognizing that doing fewer things, but doing them with absolute intention and care, is fundamentally more valuable and efficient than doing 100 things thoughtlessly just to say you did them.
Which brings us directly back to you, the listener. As you go about your day today, whether you are commuting, sitting at your desk, or making dinner, we want you to ask yourself, where in your life are you walking a half step ahead of yourself?
Where are you rushing through the present moment just to get to a future that never quite arrives?
And equally important, take a hard look at your obligations and your connections. Which relationships, which projects, which daily routines are you tolerating purely out of habit? What have you been calling fine for years without actually meaning it?
It is time to trade that frantic double-shot espresso for the slow-steeped tea.
I couldn't agree more. Before we sign off today, we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought. A question built entirely on this text premise of resonance. Think about your life right now with all its moving parts, its stresses, and its ambitions.
Okay.
If you completely stopped chasing your goals today, if you dropped the urgency, let the momentum die, and just stood incredibly still, what in your life has enough true resonance to actually stay?
It is a profound question, and one that requires a tremendous amount of courage to answer honestly.
It really is. Thank you so much for taking the time to slow down, step off the treadmill for just a little while, and explore these fascinating sources with us today. We hope it brought you a little bit of steadiness and clarity. Until next time, take a deep breath, do something deliberately, and maybe go find a rose to smell.